Systematic approach is the top strength. Now about Europe, it supports Ukraine. I have repeatedly shown how much Ukraine's economy now mostly depends on European funding. And what's going on in Europe in this blooming garden of Borel? Let's take a look right away. Here we are immediately shown that hundreds of thousands of jobs are at risk of being lost. And the European Commission is saying this directly. As many as 560,000 jobs are at risk of being lost. That is, these jobs are vacated, no one comes to fill them, and those who leave end up unemployed. The most at-risk sectors are the industrial energy-intensive industries. That is what used to be the driving force of the European Union and led to the current state of the economy. That is the good state of the economy which is gradually deteriorating. And with this situation, this deterioration will gradually accelerate. In Europe, they are forecasting an increase in unemployment up to 6% and increased pressure on industry due to competition and structural changes. What kind of competition they mean is still unclear, but the fact that car factories and industrial plants are shutting down due to various factors, including the rising cost of energy resources, that is oil and its derivatives, is certain, because the type of competition is still unclear. In 2026, the pressure of high prices, like I mentioned, on energy resources and construction companies could put 500,000 jobs at risk. And the main sectors are construction, metallurgy, the chemical industry, transport, and logistics. These industries depend the most on energy-intensive production, and they are the most sensitive to fluctuations in the prices of oil, gas, and everything else. Previously, they said the unemployment rate would be around 5%, 9, 10, 5, 8, now it's 6% and most likely even higher. At the same time, GDP is decreasing. -3 in 2025, -3.5 in 2026, -3.6 in 2027. And as I said before, again, the biggest risk is the European automotive industry. I wanted to say for centuries, well, for decades, has actually been in good condition. And now it is going through the largest, as they tell us, transformation. What do they mean by transformation? Probably collapse over decades. Again, they tell us about these 600,000 jobs, and we're talking about the transition from internal combustion engines to electric vehicles. And increased competition from China. There's a lot said about all this, about what can be done and what can't be done. But it seems to me that the bifurcation point has been passed, and unfortunately it will only get worse from here. It's the worst in Germany. Germany now, the main focus of Germany in the person of Merz's Protagonos and his accomplices, let's say, is on what's happening in Ukraine and not on their own economy, not on their own industry. The attention from the rulers, again, seems to be less focused. At the same time, the car factories that are closing are gradually being replaced by military factories, which, as we know, produce a certain product, whether it's tanks or shells, it doesn't matter, but it has no consumer value. That is, an ordinary person won't buy it. And the economy largely relies on products, on goods with consumer value. This means that it could lead to possible growth or just a slowdown in the rate of economic decline for a certain period, but then everything will get worse and worse. For example, we are told about jobs in Germany, and it turns out that the automotive industry in Germany will lose another 125,000 jobs by 2035. That's a huge number. And more businesses will continue to shut down. It was previously assumed that between 2019 and 2035, the German automotive industry would have to cut 190,000 jobs, but now this figure has been revised to 225,000. Parts manufacturers are suffering, and we're told that easing the measures could help, but the measures are not being eased. And now they're even considering the possibility of approving the agreement, or rather they've already approved it. That's the most interesting part. And in Europe, there are problems with their own goods, and it's like, let's import goods from somewhere else. So, Ursula von der Leyen signed an agreement with Latin America to import meat from Latin America, and as a result, their own farms and producers are under threat. And this is no joke, really. Plus, they're also looking at the US. An agreement has just been approved here, with the US on 15% tariffs on goods from the European Union. And after 2 failed attempts, the lawmakers are still resisting. Those who still have something left, like gunpowder in their powder flasks, berries in their berry baskets, and brains in their heads. They finally approved the trade message, the agreement, and this treaty provides for the removal of European tariffs on American goods. And Washington will be able to impose tariffs of 15% on goods instead of products from the European Union. That's the kind of treaty it is, honestly. I don't even know who made it or why. I mean, I understand why it was adopted, budget allocations, kickbacks, and all that. But how are citizens supposed to look at all of this anyway? As a citizen of Spain, I look at all of this with surprise because something strange is happening. But for most people, apparently, everything is fine, and politicians only occasionally remember that, well, there are some problems with this. The Committee on International Trade voted to approve the pact. And in addition, the European Union commits to purchasing energy resources from the United States worth $750 billion by the end of 2028. That's almost $1 trillion. And also, if I remember correctly, there's something like $450 billion for weapons for Ukraine. Also by around that year. So $1.5 trillion will be spent, and it's not clear where it's all going. And they won't bring any benefit to the European Union's economy. They're inventing things. In reality, they're of essentially no real benefit to the economy. Except, once again, for the purpose of spending those very budgets. Well, the European Union is left without $1.5 trillion. Despite the fact that most of the countries are still extremely wealthy. And in terms of GDP and production, things aren't declining that quickly after all. But if you keep cutting the branch you're sitting on at this pace, sooner or later that branch might break off along with all that powerful leadership sitting on it. It's extremely strange. And as an indicator of the state of the European Union's economy, you can use inflation. And it's very high. For Europe, it's 3.2%. It's just terrible. And due to fuel supply disruptions amid the conflict in the Middle East, energy prices have risen the most. Oh, surprise! How did that happen? These very leaders will exclaim, who never expected it, just like they expect snow in winter or rain in summer. Inflation has risen. It accelerated in April. Over the year, energy prices have risen the most, 10, almost 11%, due to fuel supply disruptions from the Middle East because of the blocked Hormuz Strait. What's going on with the strait, you might ask? Is the situation getting better? I'll tell you no. On the contrary, it's getting worse. Iran hasn't lifted it yet, of course. Formally, the truce with the US still exists, but in reality, there is no truce. They're bombing each other's infrastructure, they're bombing vehicles, and the Hormuz Strait remains blocked. And the US, represented by Trump, can't do anything about it. Maybe Trump should be given another peace award? It's something to think about, because the man is really working hard. The highest inflation was recorded in Bulgaria, Greece, and powerful Lithuania, the most powerful country in the entire European Union, which, by the way, is the loudest when it comes to calling for war. Problems with the economy, problems with the population, which is leaving. I have Lithuanian acquaintances, they say something unimaginable is happening there. But let's go to war, say the Lithuanians. Inflation in the Eurozone exceeded 3% for the first time since 2023. Here we have another increase in the interest rate, and they might raise them for the first time since September 2023. So there's nothing good to expect here either. An increase in the cost of loans doesn't lead to anything good, but there is some good news. NATO, again, represented by European countries. Because the US refuses to help, they are preparing an additional aid package for Ukraine. For as much as 70 billion euros, I think that's great. Another plus, or rather minus 70 billion euros. To accelerate the free fall of this economy, soon it will be whistling as it flies. When it comes into contact with the air, NATO countries are considering new commitments for military funding to Ukraine in the amount of 70 billion euros. They plan to announce them at the Alliance Summit on July 7-8. This is not the 90 billion that has already been allocated, and everything is already being put to use there. Fortifications are already being built everywhere with all possible effort. The Minister of Foreign Affairs with a portable bulletproof vest for the head is telling everyone everywhere about the miracles of Ukrainian diplomacy, especially from Kryvyi Rih. And they really are miracles because out of nowhere, NATO is allocating more money. The key thing, they tell us, is to get a firm commitment at the summit in Ankara to continue supporting Ukraine on a stable and more just basis. Apparently, before it was unfair, and now it's fair. Why it was unfair before and now it's fair is also unclear. There are a lot of things that are unclear here. 30 billion euros allocated from a 2-year loan. 40 billion from bilateral commitments of the alliance member countries. And that's normal, we're told. Well, of course it's normal. Why not? Most NATO allies are also members of the EU. That's a twist, you might say, but we knew that's how it is. It would be unfair to demand a double contribution from them, one of the diplomats explained. The Swedish foreign minister warned that European countries should not see the 90 billion euro loan as a replacement for bilateral support. On the contrary, we need to add more. Let's throw in even more on top. Well, the US has taken a back seat. That is, there's no financial aid from them, except I think for 7 billion that the Senate allocated for the US economy. That won't happen. Before, Biden used to allocate 320 billion or even 400, but here it's just 7 billion just to whitewash, to paint over. You know, that's probably just for Italian tiles, for those fortification structures. And there won't be enough for anything else. This money will run out quickly. But then there will be that very bilateral support from Europe. So everything is fine, there's no need to worry, both Yermak and all those powerful leaders will have a place to live. No, and finally the situation in Ukraine will improve. As for Europe, things aren't looking so good here. Because Merz will most likely be the negotiator from the European Union. This strong-willed man is going to negotiate with Russia regarding Ukraine, planning to speed up reaching a ceasefire. They were looking for all this, and now they found it. Scholz. Scholz has already met, by the way. That's not Merz, but Scholz, the previous powerful leader from Germany with Putin. It was interesting at that distance. Well, and Merz never communicated with Putin, not even by phone. But actually, Merz insisted that negotiations with the Kremlin should only begin after a ceasefire is reached. So, in that case, the role of Europe remains completely unclear. If a ceasefire has already been reached, then what's the point of talking to Scholz himself? What kind of powerful group of leaders is this? It's a coalition of the lustful, the eager, the envious. Call them whatever you want, it's all the same. There's not much use in any of this. Well, now they're saying that a window is opening for negotiations between the European side and Russia. Why it's open, who opened it, that's also unclear. Maybe a cleaning lady was passing by and accidentally bumped into it and opened it. But Jürgen Wadeful, that's our German foreign minister, stated that it's time to sit down at the negotiating table with Putin, because the conflict has entered a phase that urgently requires an end. Previously, apparently, the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people was not a phase that urgently required an end. All thanks to, we're told, military successes. Ukraine has achieved this in recent weeks, despite the escalation of Russian strikes on Ukrainian cities. Well, and lastly, probably, this is about the US. And the US is doing fine. They've stepped away from Ukraine, but now they're taking control of Venezuelan oil. Americans are preparing to get rich and are on the right track. If you consider the state's development strategy, if you take into account the moral aspect and the aspect of international agreements, then of course, this is a disaster. When you attack a country to influence Russia, they deny the accusations of theft. What will the US do? They will lift sanctions, control oil sales, and decide who gets the profits, denying any accusations of theft. Well, naturally, because it's just exploitation, these are political tools, not theft at all. Trump said that the US would temporarily give the interim Venezuelan authorities from 30 to 50 million barrels of oil. This is out of goodwill, of course. This amount corresponds to 1 or 2 months of oil production in Venezuela, and the oil will be sold at market prices, with the money being controlled by Trump. I think that's great. As if we don't have enough of this already. China is planning to carry out a special maritime operation in Taiwan. In the Taiwan area, it's not an attack yet, but it already looks like another little war is approaching. China has announced the start of a special naval operation to the east of Taiwan. This is how Beijing responded to the agreement between Japan and the Philippines to hold talks on maritime borders in the area and to deepen defense cooperation. On Saturday, the Ministry of Transport of the PRC organized a special operation to control maritime traffic, according to the state agency Xinhua. The goal of the operation is to implement China's maritime administrative jurisdiction and protect national interests. If Taiwan is blockaded, our chips are essentially lost. Not the chips themselves, but the manufacturers will be in serious trouble. They won't get their money on time and won't be able to deliver to customers, and we'll be the ones crying, looking at the price tags, at laptops, at phones, at components. And corporations will be crying even more since they need all this 100 times over. Especially those working with artificial intelligence. Again, artificial intelligence is developing very actively right now. and it continues to drive the economies of those countries that have an artificial intelligence industry. In most cases, that's the United States. And in some other countries, huge data centers are being built. All of this drives the economy in a wonderful way, but it requires a huge amount of resources. If these resources become limited, it won't be very good. Yeah, that's how things are. So what? And let's take a look at the powerful leaders, because without them, we can't go anywhere. We can't get through a single day without them. Without their wisdom, which thank God they share with us so that we don't get lost. So where are they? Here I find them, and let's see who we choose first. We'll decide now. But there's Deputy Usachuk, a most powerful thinker of our time, who thank God has stopped virtually biting his viewers. He used to act strangely before, even with his teeth forward. But the journalist who is interviewing him looks at him very kindly. This journalist on the left always scares me. He looks from under his brows. If you saw a journalist like that, so to speak, in an alley at night, you wouldn't want any interviews. I generally tried to have less contact with him. He's very strange.
When you're close to peace. These are direct quotes that Zelensky said.
I think that, oh well, if Zelensky said it, then everything's fine. You see, you can feel Usachuk putting on his power glasses. There's no other way here. It's possible.
All these statements have already caused huge damage, especially to people of conscription age and, as they say now, draft dodgers.
Well, here we have two sitting, one in a blue suit and one in a black suit. Armored draft dodgers. Wonderful. Let's move on.
They're not eager either, but maybe these people aren't really running away. If the Supreme Commander-in-Chief says the war will end soon.
Yeah, the Supreme Commander-in-Chief. All right, excellent.
What's the point of rushing somewhere or going anywhere? People think I'll just sit it out for a couple more months, maybe half a year, and the war will be over. But this message keeps coming up all the time. We have adapted, if you can say so, to these horrors of mass bombings and shelling.
You and I, well, yes, we worked hard, me and the tractor, as always. And the draft dodgers, interestingly enough, talk about ordinary people, saying that they are not the draft dodgers, but those people who don't want to die while watching these richest citizens vacationing in different countries. By the way, a photo of Yuzik appeared. He's a very talented Ukrainian deputy who has passed hundreds of bills that have boosted Ukraine's economy straight negatively upward. Well, I mean, yes, it's falling, and this greatest deputy of all times and peoples, that's Yuzik. He's a former clown from KVN. And now he's showing off his figure. On the beaches of Spain where he owns property, not on the beach itself, but in Spain, and where he can obviously take a break from his righteous labors. He's a wonderful person. We need more like him, I think. Everything is good, that's right. You can take a break from the economy. You work, then you rest. There's some kind of war going on, but you don't care, you're relaxing, everything is great. Then there's also a very strange character who says that during assaults, your chances of survival are much higher than just somewhere in peaceful life. And it's immediately obvious that this character is a born assault trooper. Just exhausted by constant assaults, his face is thin, and again the assault trooper is in the shadows.
I don't even know what a serviceman is. Just an assault trooper. Civilians there just talk to each other.
You need strong abs so you can crawl through the trenches. The assault trooper's biceps are also developed. Well, in short, soldiers are supposed to be fit. We see an example, excellent physical shape in this assault trooper whose name is Andre.
They share things among themselves there, and everyone comes up with something. In offensive actions, that is, in assault actions, there is a better chance of surviving than being on the defense.
Aha, I see. So if you're on defense, you're guaranteed to die, but in an assault, you might survive. Wonderful, I think. That's quite a twist.
You ended up with us, not like they told you over there. Civilized assaults, local assaults, that you'll die there. That's it, no chance. We have many directions here.
You take an electric scooter, pick a direction, and ride your electric scooter while sipping a lavender raff or whatever, with strawberry smoothies puffing on a vape. Apparently, that's what Andre thinks assaults look like. Obviously, the highly experienced military citizen will attract a huge number of those whom Sachak called draft dodgers. They'll see Andre and say, oh, now it's all clear, we won't die, there's no threat to our lives, let's go become assault troops. The logic is perfect. Well, wonderful. Anyway, have a great day, everyone. Goodbye.
The question was about assistance with reconstruction after the war, and that Russia wants to help.
Have to give us money. Yeah, they can give us money. Money for this, and we will rebuild everything we need to rebuild, and we will decide what to do.